The conference room aboard Zenith Prime stretched for nearly a kilometer, its ceiling lost in artificial clouds that glowed with soft blue light. Representatives from 43 different species filled the massive space, each delegation seated in sections designed for their unique biology. Some breathed methane, others required zero gravity, and a few existed partially in dimensions human eyes couldn't perceive. Commander Jake Morrison sat in the Earth delegation's modest section, a simple chair at a simple table. He wore his standard Terran Fleet uniform, dark blue with silver trim, no medals or decorations visible. To his left sat two junior officers, both looking nervous and out of place. To his right, an empty chair reserved for Admiral Cora Wells, who was attending remotely from Earth. The Vraxian ambassador stood at the central podium, his crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns across the floor. His voice resonated through translation devices worn by every attendee. The Krell Dominion has now conquered 17 systems. Their fleet grows stronger with each victory. We must organize a unified response, or we will fall one by one. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Krell were ruthless, efficient, and apparently unstoppable. Their military doctrine was simple: overwhelming force, applied without mercy. They had destroyed 3 civilizations completely, turning populated worlds into lifeless rocks as warnings to others. A Shara representative, her feline features twisted in concern, spoke next. "We need a war leader, someone with experience commanding multi-species forces, someone who understands modern warfare." Several names were proposed: the Drakon Fleetmaster, who had won 12 major engagements; the Hivemind Tactical Cluster from Kepler 442b, which could process battlefield data faster than any individual; the Eldari Strategic Council, whose civilization had existed for 4 million years. Jake listened quietly, his hands folded on the table. He studied each speaker, noting their body language, their arguments, their assumptions. They all thought in terms of honor, of traditional fleet engagements, of warfare as a chess game played by agreed-upon rules. Finally, he raised his hand. The Vraxian ambassador noticed and seemed surprised. "The chair recognizes Commander Morrison of Earth." Jake stood, feeling the weight of dozens of alien eyes upon him. Some were literally eyes, others were sensory organs he couldn't name. "I volunteered to lead the defense fleet," he said simply. For a moment, silence filled the massive chamber. Then laughter began, starting with the Shara delegation and spreading like wildfire. The sound was strange, a mixture of barks, clicks, and harmonic resonances that translation devices struggled to convey. "With respect, Commander," the Shara diplomat said, her whiskers twitching with amusement, "Earth has been part of the galactic community for barely a century. Your species has no experience with interstellar warfare. You have no natural advantages, no enhanced biology, no hive mind, no psychic abilities. You are, forgive my bluntness, the weakest species in this chamber." More laughter. Jake didn't react, didn't show anger or embarrassment. He simply waited for it to die down. The Vraxian ambassador tried to be diplomatic. "Commander Morrison, perhaps Earth could contribute support vessels, supply ships, perhaps medical frigates. Your species has shown aptitude for logistics." "We've shown aptitude for winning wars," Jake replied calmly. This brought fresh laughter, louder than before. A delegate from the consortium of gas giants made a sound like escaping steam, which the translator rendered as derisive snorting. On the holographic display showing Admiral Wells from Earth, Jake saw her face remain neutral, but her eyes held something else. Knowledge, understanding, maybe sadness. The Eldari scholar Lissa, seated in the observation gallery, leaned forward with interest. She had studied Earth's admission documents, had read about their primitive nuclear rockets and their single-star civilization. But something in Jake's demeanor intrigued her. He stood like someone who had already won an argument that hadn't happened yet. "Let us be practical," the Draken Fleet Master rumbled, his 4 arms crossed over his armored chest. "Humans are soft. Your homeworld has light gravity. You have no natural weapons, no armor plating, no venom, no ability to survive vacuum even briefly. You are prey animals who learn to use tools. Impressive for reaching the stars, but irrelevant for warfare." Jake let them talk. He let them list humanity's weaknesses, their disadvantages, their lack of qualifications. When they finally finished, he spoke again. "You're right about most of that," he said. "We're not the strongest. We're not the fastest. We didn't evolve with natural weapons or armor. But there's something you should know about humanity before you dismiss us." "And what is that?" the Vraxian ambassador asked, still amused but willing to humor the human. "We're very good at killing each other," Jake said flatly. "We've had 10,000 years of practice." The laughter died away. Some delegates looked confused, others uncomfortable. Lissa pulled up Earth's historical database on her personal device. The files were public record, but she had never bothered to look deeply. Most species included their cultural achievements in their admission documents: art, philosophy, scientific discoveries. Earth had included those too, but now she started reading the military history section. Her eyes widened as she scrolled. "The Krell are experienced warriors," the Shara diplomat countered. "They have conquered 17 systems. They know warfare." "They know conquest," Jake corrected. "That's different from warfare. Conquest is what happens when one side is significantly stronger. Warfare is what happens when both sides are desperate to survive." The Vraxian ambassador decided to end this uncomfortable conversation. "Commander Morrison, we appreciate Earth's enthusiasm. However, the Council feels that humanity would be better suited for support roles. This is not an insult. Every species contributes where they are most capable." Jake nodded slowly. "I understand, but I'll make you a deal. Give me command of a small fleet. Mixed species, whatever ships you can spare. If I fail, Earth will accept whatever support role you assign. But if I succeed, you'll listen when I talk about warfare." Admiral Wells spoke for the first time, her voice coming through clearly. "The commander has my full authorization to make this commitment on behalf of Earth." The delegates conferred among themselves. Finally, the Vraxian ambassador spoke. "Very well. We will assign you 12 ships, a mix of Vraxian, Shara, Eldari, and Terran vessels. Your mission will be to probe the Krell defenses in the Helios system, gather intelligence, engage if necessary, but avoid significant losses. Do you accept these terms?" "I accept," Jake said. As the council adjourned, Lissa made her way down to the departure area where the human delegation was preparing to leave. She caught Jake in a quiet corridor, away from the crowds. "Commander Morrison," she called out. He turned, his expression polite but neutral. "Yes? I'm Lissa. I'm an Eldari scholar studying newly admitted species. I was wondering if I could interview you about Earth's military history." Jake studied her for a moment. She was tall and slender, with silver skin and large dark eyes that held genuine curiosity rather than mockery. "What do you want to know?" he asked. "Your species has been fighting for 10,000 years, she said, "fighting each other. How are you not extinct?" Jake smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's the wrong question. The right question is what kind of species learns to fight like that and still chooses peace when they finally can." He started walking again. Over his shoulder he added, "You're welcome to join the fleet as a cultural liaison. You'll get your answers soon enough." Lissa watched him go, her tablet still displaying Earth's history files. She had barely scratched the surface, and already she felt a chill running down her spine. The wars had names. So many names. Conflicts that had lasted longer than some civilizations had existed. Weapons that could destroy worlds, invented and aimed at their own cities. She accepted Jake's invitation that same day. She needed to understand what the galaxy had just welcomed into its community. And more importantly, what they had just unleashed on the Krell. The fleet assembled near the jump point to the Helios system looked like a collection of museum pieces from different eras. The Vraxian dreadnought Eternal Vigil dominated the formation, a massive crystalline structure that could survive direct hits from fusion weapons. 3 Shara destroyers prowled the flanks like hunting cats, sleek and fast. 2 Eldari science vessels hung at the rear, their ancient hulls covered in sensors that had been recording data for millennia. The remaining ships were Terran, 3 frigates and a destroyer, small by galactic standards, but packed with missiles and railguns. Jake stood on the bridge of the Terran destroyer Defiance, watching the tactical display. His crew consisted of 20 humans and a dozen alien observers, including Lissa, who had set up a workstation in the corner, where she could watch and record everything. Captain Lisa Monroe approached him, tablet in hand. "Sir, the Vraxian commander is requesting another meeting. He wants to review the battle plan again." Jake sighed. This would be the 4th meeting in 6 hours. "Tell him I'll send over the updated tactical package in 1 hour." Lisa hesitated. "He specifically said he wants to meet face to face. He's concerned about the dispersal pattern you've ordered." "He's concerned because it's not what he expected," Jake said, "which is exactly the point." The Vraxian commander, Zeth Kor, had served in 43 fleet engagements over his 2-century career. He understood warfare as a formal affair. Fleets met in open space, exchanged fire at maximum range, and the side with better shields and weapons prevailed. Jake's plan violated every principle Zeth Kor held sacred. Jake had ordered the fleet to split into 4 groups, each taking different approach vectors to Helios. They would go silent, running on minimal power, using the system's asteroid belt and gas giant for cover. No formation flying, no coordinated assault. Just individual hunter-killer groups, stalking the Krell occupation force. When Jake finally met with Zeth Kor via hologram, the crystalline commander was agitated, his usual calm demeanor replaced with visible frustration. "This is not warfare," Zeth Kor said bluntly. "This is chaos. How can we support each other if we're scattered across the system? How can we concentrate our firepower? This violates every tactical doctrine in the Galactic Military Database." "Good," Jake replied. "The Krell have access to the same database. They'll expect us to follow it." "We follow it because it works," Zeth Kor insisted. "Civilization has refined these tactics over millions of years across thousands of species. Your world has been in space for barely a century. You cannot simply discard accumulated wisdom." Jake pulled up a file on his own tablet. "Let me show you something. This is from Earth's military history, the year 1941, old calendar, a place called Pearl Harbor." The hologram displayed images of primitive aircraft carriers and battleships. Zeth Kor watched with barely concealed impatience as Jake explained how the Empire of Japan had launched a surprise attack on the United States, ignoring conventional wisdom about how naval warfare should be conducted. "They won that battle decisively," Jake said, "not because they had better ships, but because they understood that surprising your enemy matters more than following the rules." "And did this Empire of Japan win their war?" Zeth Kor asked pointedly. "No," Jake admitted, "but that's a different lesson. The point is, the Krell expect us to fight like you've always fought. Predictable, honorable, by the book. We're not going to do that." Zeth Kor's form flickered with frustration. "I am registering a formal protest with the Galactic Council. This mission will fail, and I will not have it recorded that Vraxian tactics were responsible." "Noted," Jake said calmly. "Now, are you going to follow my orders, or should I request a different ship?" The question hung in the air. Finally, Zeth Kor gave the Vraxian equivalent of a resigned sigh. I will comply, but I do so under protest. The fleet entered the Helios system 3 hours later. Immediately they detected the Krell presence. 15 warships orbiting the fourth planet, with patrol groups stationed near the jump points. The Krell ships were blocky and utilitarian, covered in weapons and armor, but with little elegance. They looked like flying fortresses, which is essentially what they were. Jake ordered the fleet to scatter, according to plan. Lyssa watched from her station, as the tactical display showed their ships spreading across the system, like seeds in the wind. "This seems dangerous," she observed quietly. Lieutenant Amy Carter, the young pilot stationed nearby, grinned. "That's the point. Predictable is dangerous. Unpredictable keeps you alive." Over the next 6 hours, Jake orchestrated a campaign that baffled both the Krell and his own allies. A Shara destroyer would appear from behind an asteroid, launch missiles at a Krell patrol ship, then vanish before return fire arrived. The Terran frigate Relentless performed a velocity-matching maneuver that brought them alongside a Krell supply vessel, close enough that the Krell couldn't fire without damaging their own ship. Boarding parties secured the vessel without a single shot fired. Zeth Kor watched in amazement as the Eternal Vigil, following Jake's instructions, used its massive bulk not as a command ship, but as bait. When 2 Krell destroyers moved to engage what they thought was an isolated capital ship, they found themselves caught in a crossfire from 3 Terran frigates that had been hiding in the shadow of a nearby moon. "How did you know they would respond that way?" Zeth Kor asked over the command channel. "Because it's what I would do if I saw an isolated capital ship," Jake replied. "The Krell are aggressive. Show them a target, they'll go for it. That's not a weakness in most battles, but it becomes one when someone's deliberately setting traps." Lyssa was furiously taking notes. She had started accessing more of Earth's military database, reading about concepts like asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, and psychological operations. These weren't in the Galactic military archives. They were uniquely human innovations, born from fighting enemies who were often stronger, better equipped, or more numerous. On the second day, Jake implemented something he called terror tactics. The Defiance approached a Krell monitoring station and broadcast a message on all frequencies. The message was simple: a list of every Krell ship in the system, their current positions, and predictions of where they would be in 6 hours. Then the Defiance vanished into the asteroid belt. 6 hours later, exactly as predicted, a Krell patrol ship was ambushed at the coordinates Jake had specified. The remaining Krell forces began to panic. How did the humans know their movements so precisely? Did they have spies? Some new sensor technology? The truth was simpler and more disturbing. Jake understood how military minds worked. He knew how patrol patterns were set, how commanders responded to threats, how bureaucratic command structures created predictable behaviors. He was predicting the Krell not through technology, but through psychology. By the third day, the Krell occupation commander requested reinforcements. His forces were intact, barely damaged, but his crews were exhausted and demoralized. They were being hunted in space that should have been under their control. Jake called a meeting with all ship commanders. When Zeth Kor's hologram appeared, his usual confident posture was replaced with something that might have been respect. "I owe you an apology, Commander Morrison," the Vraxian said formally. "Your tactics are unconventional, but they are effective. I have studied warfare for 2 centuries, and I have never seen anything like this." "You've studied galactic warfare," Jake corrected gently. "You've studied battles between civilized species who agree on certain fundamental rules. Humans don't fight like that, because we learned warfare fighting each other. We learned that there are no rules except survival." A Shara captain spoke up, her feline face curious. "But surely your species must have had some code of honor, some limitations on how war was conducted." Jake's expression darkened slightly. "We had codes, We broke them when we had to. We had limitations. We ignored them when we were desperate. We created weapons that could destroy our entire world, and we built thousands of them, and we aimed them at our own cities for 50 years. That's what human warfare looks like when the stakes are high enough. The channel fell silent. Lissa felt her hands trembling as she wrote. She had read about the Cold War, about the doctrine called mutually assured destruction, the idea that a species would build weapons capable of rendering their own planet uninhabitable, just to deter other humans from attacking, was incomprehensible to most galactic citizens. So what do we do now? The Krell are requesting reinforcements. If we wait, we'll face a larger force. Jake smiled, and for the first time, Lissa saw something dangerous in that smile. We don't wait. We make them surrender before the reinforcements arrive. How? Multiple voices asked simultaneously. By teaching them the same lesson every human learns eventually, Jake said. That being hunted is worse than dying in battle. We're going to make them so afraid that surrender seems like the better option. Over the next 18 hours, the Defiance and its sister ships conducted a campaign of psychological warfare that would be studied in military academies for generations. They destroyed supply lines, but left crews alive in escape pods. They disabled weapons, but didn't destroy ships. They demonstrated they could kill whenever they wanted, but chose not to. The message was clear. We are in control. We are allowing you to live, and that can change at any moment. When the Krell occupation commander finally surrendered, he asked to speak with Jake personally. The hologram showed a massive reptilian figure, scaled and scarred from decades of warfare. "What are you?" the Krell commander asked, his translator rendering his voice as a low growl. Jake considered the question. "We're the species that learn to fight by fighting ourselves. We're what happens when prey animals refuse to die." The Krell commander's eyes narrowed. "I have conquered 12 worlds. I have faced the best warriors in this sector. But I have never faced anything like you. You fight without honor." "No," Jake corrected quietly. "We fight to win." News of the Helios victory spread through the galactic communication network like fire through dry grass. Within 48 hours, every species in the known galaxy had heard about the human commander who defeated a Krell occupation force without losing a single ship. The reaction was mixed. Some praised the tactical innovation. Others expressed concern about these unsettling newcomers to the galactic stage. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Jake stood before them again, but this time the laughter was gone. The assembled delegates watched him with wary respect, like prey animals studying a predator that had just entered their territory. "Commander Morrison," the Vraxian ambassador began, his crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights. "Your victory was remarkable. However, some on the council have expressed concern about your methods. The Krell commander reported that your forces engaged in what he called psychological torture. Would you care to explain?" Jake remained standing at ease, his hands clasped behind his back. "We made them afraid. That's not torture. That's warfare. The Krell expected us to fight like you fight. Honorable fleet engagements. Minimal casualties. Surrender when defeat becomes inevitable. We showed them a different kind of war." An Eldari counselor spoke up, his ancient voice trembling slightly. "Commander, my species has studied conflict resolution for 4 million years. We have learned that escalation of violence leads only to greater destruction. Your tactics seem designed to maximize fear rather than minimize harm." "With respect," Jake replied, "minimizing harm is a luxury you have when you're stronger than your enemy. When you're weaker, you use what tools you have. Fear is a tool." Lissa sat in the observation gallery, her tablet filled with notes. Over the past week, she had become obsessed with understanding human military history. What she discovered both fascinated and horrified her. Humans had developed entire academic fields devoted to studying warfare. They had professional soldiers who did nothing but prepare for combat. They had built elaborate training facilities that simulated battlefields with terrifying accuracy. But what truly disturbed her was the documentation. Humans wrote everything down. Every battle, every tactic, every lesson learned was recorded in meticulous detail. They had books about warfare that were thousands of years old, still studied and referenced. They treated war like a science. The council debated for hours about what to do with Earth's military. Some wanted to restrict human involvement in galactic affairs. Others argued that the Krell threat was too serious to ignore humanity's effectiveness. Finally, a compromise was reached. Jake would be asked to train other species commanders in human tactical doctrine, but Earth would be monitored closely. Jake accepted the assignment without enthusiasm. "I'll train them," he said, "but understand that what we do isn't something you can learn in a classroom. It's built from thousands of years of desperation." The training sessions began 3 days later aboard Zenith Prime. Commanders from 15 different species gathered in a tactical simulation center. Jake stood before a holographic display showing a standard fleet engagement scenario. "Who can tell me the optimal formation for this situation?" Jake asked. Every hand went up. The answers were identical, pulled from the Galactic Military Database. Jake listened politely, then shook his head. "All wrong," he said flatly. "You're all thinking about how to win this engagement. That's not the question you should be asking." A Draken commander bristled, his forearms crossing defensively. "Then what question should we ask?" he demanded. "Why are we fighting this engagement at all?" Jake replied. "Who chose this battlefield? Who set these terms? If you accept the enemy's conditions, you've already lost half the battle." He reprogrammed the simulation, changing the parameters. "This is the same scenario, but now we choose when and where to fight. We refuse the engagement, draw them into terrain that favors us, and hit them when they're not ready. It takes longer, it's less honorable, but it wins." The training continued, with Jake systematically dismantling every conventional tactic the galactic military had developed. He taught them about ambush tactics, false retreats, feigned weakness, and psychological manipulation. Most commanders struggled with the concepts, finding them distasteful or dishonorable. Lissa approached Jake after one particularly difficult session. "They're not adapting well," she observed. Jake watched the departing commanders with an unreadable expression. "They've never had to. Most species reach the stars through cooperation and unity. They extend that philosophy to warfare. But humans reach the stars while still pointing weapons at each other. We learned to cooperate despite being competitors. That's a different kind of unity." Before Lissa could respond, alarms began blaring throughout Zenith Prime. The tactical displays lit up with red warning icons. A massive Krell fleet had appeared at the edge of the Theron Nebula, only 3 jumps from the Galactic Council's core worlds. The Council reconvened in panic. The sensor readings showed over 300 Krell warships, the largest armada ever assembled. It was clear that the Krell had decided to end the war with one overwhelming blow. "We need to evacuate," the Shara diplomat said, her fur standing on end. "We can't fight a fleet that size." "We have maybe 200 ships in the sector," Zethkor reported. "Even with every vessel we can muster, we're outnumbered significantly. Recommendation: strategic withdrawal to defensive positions." Jake studied the tactical display, his eyes moving over the fleet compositions, the nebula's sensor-disrupting properties, the probable Krell approach vectors. The room watched him, and for the first time since the Helios victory, some of them looked hopeful. "Give me command of all Allied forces," Jake said quietly. The council chamber erupted in argument. Several delegates objected immediately, citing the need for consensus, the importance of traditional command structures, the danger of giving one person such authority. Admiral Wells appeared on the holographic communicator. Members of the Council, Earth officially requests that Commander Morrison be given unified command. If you refuse, we understand, but our forces will be withdrawing to defend our home system. The threat was clear. Without Earth's ships and Jake's tactical expertise, the alliance would crumble. The vote was called. It passed narrowly. Jake's first order surprised everyone. Retreat. Fall back to the Theron Nebula, he commanded. All ships, full retreat, maximum speed, make it look panicked. Scatter formation, as if command and control has broken down. Zeth Kor protested immediately. The nebula will blind our sensors as much as theirs. We'll lose our coordination advantage, Jake countered. We don't have a coordination advantage. They outnumber us, outgun us, and their commanders have centuries of experience. But they expect us to fight like you've always fought. We're going to give them exactly what they expect, until we don't. The Allied fleet fled into the Theron Nebula, a massive cloud of ionized gas and dust that scrambled most sensors. The Krell fleet pursued eagerly, sensing victory. Their Warmaster broadcast on all channels, demanding immediate surrender. Jake ordered complete communication silence. Inside the nebula, visibility dropped to nearly zero. Ships relied on short-range sensors and beacon signals to avoid collisions. It was navigational nightmare, a place where fleets traditionally avoided fighting because coordination became nearly impossible. Which was exactly why Jake chose it. Deploy drones, he ordered, passive sensors only. I want eyes on every Krell ship, but they don't get to see us. Thousands of small sensor drones spread through the nebula, creating a surveillance network that fed data back to the Allied ships. The Krell, confident in their numbers, spread out to search for the fleeing Alliance forces. They're fragmenting, Lissa observed from her station on the Defiance. Their fleet is breaking into smaller groups. Good, Jake said. That's what happens when you chase a scattered enemy into terrain that limits visibility. Now we stop running and start hunting. What followed would be analyzed in military academies for generations. Jake turned the Allied fleet into a swarm of predators, using the nebula's sensor disruption to isolate and destroy Krell ships, one group at a time. A Krell destroyer would detect an Allied ship, move to engage, and suddenly find itself surrounded by 4 enemy vessels that had been hiding in the sensor shadow. Captain Lisa Monroe led the Defiance through a series of knife-fighting engagements that would have been suicidal in open space. She brought her ship within point-blank range of Krell vessels, too close for their heavy weapons to target effectively, and raked them with railgun fire before vanishing back into the nebula's concealment. The human pilot Amy Carter performed maneuvers that violated every safety regulation in the Galactic Fleet Manual. She flew through gas clouds that should have fried her ship's systems, used gravitational eddies to slingshot around obstacles, and once deliberately induced a sensor ghost that drew 3 Krell ships into a collision course. Zeth Kor commanded the Eternal Vigil with newfound aggression, using its massive bulk to block sensor sweeps and create dead zones where smaller Allied ships could hide. The ancient Vraxian was learning, adapting, beginning to think like a human warrior. The Krell Warmaster watched his superior numbers become a liability. In open space, 300 ships could focus fire and overwhelm any defense. In the nebula, they became isolated targets, picked off one by an enemy that refused to fight fair. After 8 hours of brutal hunting, the Krell fleet tried to regroup. Jake had anticipated this. He had positioned his forces to intercept any retreat. The Krell Warmaster found himself in the impossible position of commanding a numerically superior force that was nonetheless trapped and being systematically destroyed. The Allied losses were not insignificant. 12 ships had been destroyed, another 20 damaged. But the Krell had lost over 70 vessels, with more disabled or adrift. The psychological impact was devastating. Jake opened a channel to the Krell War Master. You came here expecting a battle. This isn't a battle. This is a hunt, and you're the prey. You can surrender now, or I can keep killing your ships one by one until there's nothing left. The Krell War Master's voice came back, filled with rage and confusion. What are you? No civilized species fights like this. This is savagery. No, Jake replied calmly. This is warfare. Real warfare, not the sanitized version you've been practicing on species too weak to fight back. You wanted a war with the Galactic Alliance. Congratulations, you found one. There was a long pause. Then, what are your terms? Jake glanced at Admiral Wells on his communicator. She gave a slight nod. Immediate withdrawal from all occupied systems. Reparations to be determined by the Galactic Council. And you're going to tell your Emperor exactly what happened here today. Another pause. He will not believe that we were defeated by such inferior numbers. Then show him the battle recordings, Jake said. Let him see what humans are capable of. Let him decide if he wants more of this. The Krell fleet withdrew 6 hours later, leaving behind their damaged ships and their pride. The Allied forces regrouped at the nebula's edge, battered but victorious. Lissa found Jake standing alone on the Defiance's observation deck, staring out at the stars. You knew they would pursue into the nebula, she said softly. You planned all of this. I planned for the most likely scenario, Jake corrected. The Krell are aggressive and overconfident. Show them retreating prey, they'll chase. It's instinct. How did you know that? Lissa asked. Jake turned to face her, and she saw exhaustion in his eyes. Because that's how humans would react too. We're predators pretending to be civilized. We recognize the behavior because we share it. The Krell Dominion's intelligence network worked quickly. Within days of the Theron Nebula defeat, every piece of available information about humanity was being analyzed. The Emperor himself demanded answers. How had a species barely a century into space travel defeated his most experienced war master and destroyed 70 warships? The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A Krell raiding party had intercepted a human scout ship near the frontier systems. The vessel was small, lightly armed, with a crew of only 4. After a brief firefight that disabled the scout ship's engines, the Krell boarded and took the crew prisoner. Among the prisoners was Chief Warrant Officer Danny Green, a career soldier with 23 years of service. He was 45 years old, with gray beginning to show in his close-cropped hair and scars marking his forearms. Unlike the other prisoners, who showed appropriate fear, Danny seemed almost amused by his captivity. The Krell interrogator, a specialist named Jor, studied the human across a bare metal table. You find your situation entertaining? Jor asked, his translator rendering his hissing speech into flat, emotionless words. Danny shrugged. I've been in worse spots. Besides, you want information, which means you're confused. I like it when the enemy is confused. Jor's scales rippled with irritation. Your species has defeated Krell forces twice now. This should be impossible. We want to know how. That's the wrong question, Danny said, leaning back in his chair despite the restraints. The right question is why you're losing to us. Explain. Danny considered for a moment. You ever heard of the Mongols? No, of course not. Old Earth Empire existed about 800 years ago by our calendar. They conquered most of the known world at the time. Killed millions. Built the largest land empire in human history. You know what their secret was? Jor waited silently. They were willing to adapt, Danny continued. They learned from every enemy they fought. Chinese siege engines, Persian cavalry tactics, European logistics. They took the best from everyone and made it their own. But here's the thing. They were fighting other humans. We've been doing this to each other for thousands of years. Your species fought itself? Jor asked, genuinely confused. Civil wars? Not just civil wars, Danny said. International wars, tribal wars, religious wars, wars over resources, wars over ideas, wars because somebody's great-grandfather insulted somebody else's great-grandfather. We've been fighting constantly, evolving our tactics, building better weapons, learning more efficient ways to kill each other. Jor pulled up data on his terminal. Our intelligence shows that Earth currently has over 190 recognized nations. Surely, they cooperate now. Sure, mostly, Danny agreed. But that's recent. Very recent. When we launched our first space missions, we had 2 major power blocks aiming enough nuclear weapons at each other to destroy our planet several times over. We reached for the stars while holding a gun to our own heads. The interrogation continued for hours. Jor, despite himself, became fascinated. He ordered his subordinates to access Earth's public historical databases and began cross-referencing Danny's claims. What he found shook him to his core. The files were extensive, meticulously documented. Humans had fought over 6,000 recorded wars in their known history. They had developed siege warfare, naval warfare, aerial warfare, armored warfare, and dozens of other specialized combat disciplines. They had written books analyzing famous battles from thousands of years ago, treating ancient conflicts like scientific case studies. This cannot be accurate, Jor insisted, showing Danny the records. This lists a conflict called the 100 Years' War. No species fights for a century. Actually, that one lasted 116 years, Danny corrected. And it wasn't even continuous fighting, just on and off warfare between 2 kingdoms over succession rights. Pretty standard stuff. Standard? Jor's scales shifted color, a sign of deep distress. Look, Danny said, his tone becoming more serious. You want to know why you're losing? It's because you think of war as an aberration, something unusual, something to be ended quickly. Humans think of peace as the aberration. We're always preparing for the next war. Even during peacetime, we maintain standing armies, we run training exercises, we study historical battles, we develop new weapons. War is our default state. We just got good at pretending otherwise. Jor made a decision that would change the course of the conflict. He transmitted the entire interrogation to Krell High Command, along with selected files from Earth's historical database. He included footage of human conflicts, grainy videos from ancient wars, high-definition recordings from more recent battles, tactical analyses written by human military theorists. The Krell Emperor watched the files in his throne room, surrounded by his highest-ranking military advisors. They saw humans fighting in trenches, in jungles, in deserts, in cities. They saw weapons of horrifying efficiency, chemical agents that dissolved lungs, biological weapons that turned bodies against themselves, nuclear devices that created artificial suns. But what disturbed the Emperor most were the strategic bombing campaigns. Humans had deliberately targeted civilian population centers, not out of cruelty, but as calculated strategy to break enemy morale. They had burned entire cities, killed hundreds of thousands of non-combatants, and documented it all with cold statistical analysis. They did this to themselves? One advisor asked, his voice trembling. To their own species? The Emperor sat in silence for a long time. Finally he spoke. Find out everything about their military commanders. Specifically, find out about the one leading their forces now, the one called Morrison. The intelligence division went to work. They accessed public records, intercepted communications, and pieced together Jake Morrison's service history. What they found was incomplete, but deeply troubling. Jake had joined Earth's military at 18. He had served in what humans called special operations for 15 years before transferring to the space fleet. His exact missions were classified, but intelligence analysts could infer certain facts from the gaps in his record. Long deployments to conflict zones, extended periods with no official location, commendations for operations that officially never happened. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A decoded transmission between two retired human soldiers who had served with Jake. The transmission was casual, reminiscing about old times. But it included a nickname that Jake's unit had used. They had called him the Reaper. The intelligence officers traced the nickname through various databases and intercepted communications. The picture that emerged was fragmentary but terrifying. The Reaper was a legend in certain human military circles. A soldier who had conducted operations that officially didn't exist in places that officially weren't conflict zones. Someone who understood warfare not as a profession, but as an art form. One intercepted message stood out. A human veteran, drunk and speaking freely to friends, had said, "Jake wasn't like the rest of us. We were soldiers. He was something else." He looked at a battlefield the way a chess master looks at a board, except the pieces were real and the stakes were life and death. I saw him plan an operation once, just improvising based on available resources and enemy positions. It was like watching someone compose music, except the music was violence. The Krell Emperor called an emergency council meeting. He presented the findings to his military leadership, and for the first time in the Empire's history, they discussed the possibility of a negotiated peace. Meanwhile, back on Zenith Prime, the Galactic Council was holding its own emergency session. Several species had begun investigating Earth's history more thoroughly, and the discoveries were causing alarm. The Eldari Counselor, his voice heavy with age and sadness, addressed the assembly. "I have reviewed the entirety of Earth's admitted historical records. In the past 10,000 years, there have been fewer than 300 years of total global peace. Most of those peaceful years occurred in isolated regions, not across the entire planet." "What does this mean?" the Shara diplomat asked. "It means," the Eldari continued, "that humanity has been in a state of conflict for over 97% of their recorded history. And yet, they survived. They didn't destroy themselves. They learned to manage their violent tendencies while never fully suppressing them." Admiral Wells appeared on the holographic communicator. "With respect, council members, you're missing the point. Yes, we have a violent history, but we're not asking you to fear us. We're asking you to let us use what we've learned to protect what we've all built together." "You ask us to trust you," the Vraxian ambassador said carefully. "But your own history shows that humans cannot be trusted to not fight each other." "No," Wells corrected. "Our history shows that we can't be trusted to not have conflicts. But it also shows that we can choose who we fight and who we protect. We've had defensive alliances that lasted for centuries. We've had peace treaties that held for generations. When we commit to protecting something, we're very good at it." The debate continued for hours. Some species argued for restrictions on human military involvement. Others pointed out that the Krell threat was real, and humanity was the only species showing effectiveness against them. Lissa, watching from the gallery, accessed her personal database. She had been compiling a comprehensive study of human warfare, and one pattern kept emerging. Humans were most dangerous when protecting something they valued. Individual survival, family, tribe, nation, species. Each layer added intensity to their commitment. She raised her hand and was recognized to speak. "Council members, I believe I understand something important about humanity. They are indeed violent, but that violence is directed outward when they have something to protect. Right now, they're protecting the Galactic Alliance because they see it as protection for Earth. As long as our interests align, they're reliable allies." "And when our interests don't align?" someone asked. Lissa hesitated. "Then we should hope we never have to find out." Back in the Krell interrogation facility, Danny had been moved to a more comfortable cell. Zor visited him regularly now, not for interrogation, but for conversation. Zor, interrogator, was trying to understand these strange, violent, somehow still functional beings. "Tell me about the Reaper," Zor asked during one visit. Danny looked up sharply. Where did you hear that name? Our intelligence division found references. They say Morrison was called this. They say he was feared even by other humans. Danny was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Jake's a good man, one of the best I've served with. But yeah, he earned that name. In the field he was something else. He could look at a situation and see angles nobody else saw. He could predict what the enemy would do 3 moves ahead. And when he had to fight, he was efficient. No wasted motion, no hesitation, no mercy until the fight was over. This does not sound like a good man, Jor observed. That's because you don't understand, Danny replied. Jake hated fighting, really hated it. But he was good at it, and people depended on him to keep them alive. So he learned to be the best at something he wished didn't exist. That's what makes him dangerous. He knows exactly what he's capable of, and he chooses every day not to be that person unless he has to be. Zor absorbed this information. And now he has to be? Now he's protecting his people and his allies from an empire that's been conquering and killing for decades, Danny said. So yeah, now he has to be. And that's very bad news for you. The Krell Emperor made his decision in the cold light of analysis rather than hot blood of rage. His intelligence officers had shown him the truth about humanity, about their capacity for sustained warfare, about their institutional knowledge of violence. But pride demanded one final test. If Earth could be broken, if humanity could be made to surrender, the other galactic species would fall in line. The entire campaign came down to one simple calculation: break the humans, win the war. He committed everything, every available warship, every reserve unit, every vessel that could carry weapons was mobilized. The target was obvious, not Zenith Prime, not the Galactic Council's administrative worlds, but Earth itself. Cut off the head, the body dies. Destroy humanity's homeworld, and their legend dies with them. The armada that assembled at the staging point was the largest military force ever gathered in known galactic history. Over 1,000 warships, representing the full might of the Krell Dominion. Dreadnoughts the size of cities, carriers holding hundreds of fighters, support ships, troop transports, everything needed for a planetary invasion. The Krell War Master selected for this operation was Kortal, the Emperor's own cousin, a veteran of 30 major campaigns. He stood on the bridge of the flagship Inevitable Dawn and studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. No force in the galaxy could stand against this armada. The humans had won through tricks and deception, fighting in favorable terrain against divided forces. This time, they would face overwhelming power in direct confrontation. Begin the jump sequence, Kortal ordered. All ships, formation Delta 7. We strike Earth's orbital defenses simultaneously. Establish complete space superiority. Then commence planetary bombardment. The Council will have 48 hours to surrender, or we reduce their precious Earth to rubble. The armada jumped. On Earth, the warning came 12 hours before the Krell fleet would arrive. Jake stood in the command center beneath the Swiss Alps, surrounded by holographic displays and hundreds of personnel coordinating the defense. Admiral Wells stood beside him, her face calm despite the magnitude of the threat. We have 237 combat-ready ships, she reported. Another 85 damaged vessels from the Theron engagement that are being repaired, but won't be ready in time. The Galactic Alliance is sending reinforcements, but they won't arrive for at least 72 hours. So we're outnumbered almost 5-1, Jake said calmly. Against an enemy that knows we're coming and has time to prepare. Sir, a young officer interrupted, the civilian evacuation centers are requesting status updates. People are panicking. Jake turned to face the officer. Tell them the truth. We're outnumbered. The enemy is coming. But we're going to win anyway. Sir? The officer looked confused. How can you be certain? Because they made a critical mistake, Jake replied. They're attacking our home. Every human on this planet, every soldier in our fleet, every person in our command chain knows what's at stake. The Krell think they're bringing overwhelming force. What they're actually doing is giving us overwhelming motivation. Admiral Wells pulled up the fleet positions. Earth's defense force was dispersed across the system, using the Moon, Mars, and the asteroid belt for positioning. It looked scattered, disorganized, exactly what the Krell would expect from a panic response. Confirm all units are in position, Jake ordered. Radio silence until my signal. And somebody get me a direct line to Kortal when his fleet arrives. I want to talk to him. The Krell armada dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, their sensors immediately detecting the scattered human defense force. Kortal smiled, his reptilian features pulling back to show rows of sharp teeth. The humans were running, fragmenting, already defeated before the first shot was fired. All ships advance, he commanded. Destroy any vessel that resists. Spare those that surrender. I want the human commander alive if possible. The armada moved forward, a wall of metal and weapons that blotted out the stars. As they passed Mars, human ships began appearing from behind the planet, launching missiles and then retreating. Standard harassment tactics, Kortal thought. Annoying, but irrelevant. Then the communication request came through. A human face appeared on the screen, middle-aged, calm, with eyes that held no fear. Commander Jake Morrison. I am War Master Kortal of the Krell Dominion, Kortal announced formally. You face the full might of the Emperor's fleet. Surrender now, and your species will be allowed to survive as a subject race. Resist, and Earth burns. Jake looked at him for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice carrying clearly across the channel. I am Commander Jake Morrison, Terran Defense Force. And I need you to understand something before this starts. We know what you are. You're conquerors. You've built an empire by crushing species weaker than you. But you made one critical error in your intelligence gathering. And what is that? Kortal asked, amused. You learned about our history, about our capacity for warfare, Jake said. But you didn't understand what it means. We didn't learn to fight by conquering others. We learned by fighting each other. Every tactic you know, every strategy in your database, we invented it or countered it centuries ago. You've been practicing on victims. We were forged against equals. Kortal's amusement faded. Brave words from a commander who was outnumbered 5-1. You're not listening, Jake said, and for the first time there was something cold in his voice. I'm not trying to intimidate you. I'm trying to give you one chance to withdraw. Because in about 30 seconds, I'm going to show you what happens when you threaten Earth. And your Emperor is going to wish he never heard of humanity. The channel closed. Kortal stared at the blank screen, feeling something unfamiliar. Doubt. Then he shook it off. Numbers didn't lie. No force could stand against this armada. Jake's voice came over every radio frequency simultaneously. All ships, execute Protocol Omega. For Earth. The scattered defense force suddenly wasn't scattered anymore. Ships that had been hiding in the shadows of asteroids, in the rings of Saturn, behind the moon, all activated simultaneously. The Krell fleet found itself surrounded, not by superior numbers, but by vessels that knew exactly where to be, and when. The Terran destroyer Defiance, commanded by Captain Lisa Monroe, led the first strike. She brought her ship screaming out of the asteroid belt at velocities that should have torn the vessel apart, targeting not the Krell warships, but their sensor arrays and communication relays. Within 90 seconds, the vanguard of the Krell fleet was blind and unable to coordinate. Lieutenant Amy Carter flew her fighter through weapons fire that lit up space like daylight. She performed maneuvers that violated physics according to galactic understanding, using Earth's gravity well for slingshot acceleration, skimming so close to the atmosphere that her hull glowed red from friction. She led a squadron of human pilots who flew like they were insane, because they had trained in simulation environments designed to prepare them for impossible situations. The human ships used tactics that no civilized species would consider. The frigate Relentless, damaged and losing power, deliberately rammed a Krell carrier at full velocity. The impact destroyed both ships, but it also created a debris field that blocked an entire section of the Krell formation. Captain Ryan Parker, commanding the corvette Valiant, led his small vessel on what everyone knew was a suicide run. He targeted the Krell flagship's shield generators, pouring everything his ship had into those critical systems. When his weapons ran dry, he rammed. The inevitable Dawn's shields flickered and failed. Jake watched the battle from Earth's command center, his fingers moving across holographic controls, coordinating hundreds of ships across millions of kilometers. He wasn't just fighting, he was conducting a symphony of violence, each ship a note in a larger composition. Terran heavy cruisers, advance to position Theta 9, he ordered. Prepare to saturate that sector with nuclear missiles. I want that space so radioactive that their sensors can't penetrate it. The missiles launched, dozens of them, each carrying warheads that humans had once designed to destroy their own cities. They detonated in a coordinated pattern, creating a wall of radiation and electromagnetic interference that the Krell sensors couldn't penetrate. Behind that wall, human ships prepared their real attack. Kortal watched his tactical displays deteriorate into chaos. His fleet, organized and precise minutes ago, was fragmenting under attacks that came from unexpected angles. The humans weren't trying to win through superior firepower. They were systematically destroying his ability to coordinate his forces. All ships, fall back to Rally Point Alpha, he ordered. Reform defensive perimeter. But the rally point had been mined with human weapons that had been floating dormant for hours. When the Krell ships tried to regroup, the mines activated, targeting engines and weapon systems. More chaos, more confusion, more ships damaged or destroyed. They knew, Kortal whispered. They knew exactly where we would regroup. Because Jake had studied Krell military doctrine. He had read their tactical manuals, analyzed their previous battles, understood how they thought. He knew where they would retreat, because there was only one logical place given their training and protocols. The battle raged for 18 hours. The Krell, despite their numerical superiority, found themselves constantly reacting, never initiating. Every time they tried to organize, human forces would strike at critical points. Every time they thought they understood the pattern, the humans would change tactics. Admiral Wells coordinated the defense from orbit, her flagship taking heavy damage, but refusing to withdraw. Current casualty rate is 37% and climbing. I know, Jake replied. But look at theirs. The Krell had lost over 200 vessels. More importantly, they had lost cohesion. Individual ship commanders were making independent decisions, no longer trusting the coordinated battle plan. The fleet was disintegrating from within. Jake opened a channel to the entire Krell armada. Every ship, every crew member heard his voice. This is Commander Morrison. What you're experiencing right now, this is human warfare. We don't fight fair. We don't fight by your rules. We fight to protect what's ours, and we will burn the galaxy down before we let you take Earth. He paused, letting that sink in. Then he continued, his voice becoming something else. Not angry, not passionate, but cold and absolutely certain. Your Emperor sent you here to break us, to show the galaxy that humanity can be defeated. Every species watching this battle is learning the same lesson. They're learning what happens when you threaten Earth. They're learning that humans don't surrender. They're learning that we would rather die fighting than live as subjects. The broadcast was picked up by hundreds of news services across the galaxy. Species that had been watching from safety saw the battle for what it was. Not a victory, but a statement. "You want to know my name?" Jake said, his voice carrying across the void. "You've heard the rumors, done the intelligence gathering. Yes, I was Special Forces. Yes, I conducted operations that officially never happened. Yes, my unit called me the Reaper, but I'm not special. Every human fighting right now carries that same fire. We learned to be Reapers because we had to. We learned to survive because the alternative was extinction." Kortal watched his fleet crumble. He had lost over 400 ships. His crews were demoralized. And worst of all, he knew that even if he somehow won this battle, it would be meaningless. The humans had already won the psychological war. "I am authorized to discuss terms," he said over the command channel. The fighting stopped gradually, like a storm finally exhausting itself. The remaining Krell ships pulled back to a safe distance. The human defense force, battered but intact, maintained their positions. The surrender terms were broadcast across the galaxy. Complete withdrawal from all occupied territories. Reparations for damages. Prisoners exchanged. And one additional clause, insisted upon by Jake. The Krell would publicly acknowledge that they had been defeated by humanity in defense of Earth. The Emperor, watching from his throne world, understood the message. Humanity was now a power that could not be dismissed. More importantly, they were a power that chose peace, but could wage war with terrifying efficiency. 3 months later, Jake stood in a field in Montana, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors of orange and gold. The grass moved in the wind, peaceful and ordinary. He had resigned his commission, declined the medals and honors, and retired to the simple life he had always wanted. Lissa visited him there, having traveled from Zenith Prime specifically to see him. She found him repairing a fence, doing manual labor that seemed absurdly mundane for someone who had just saved the galaxy. "The Council wants you to stay on," she said. "They're creating a permanent position, Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense. It's yours if you want it." Jake hammered another nail into the fence post. "I don't want it. I did what needed doing. That's enough." "The galaxy knows who you are now," Lissa said. "They know about the Reaper. They know what humans are capable of." Jake set down his hammer and looked at her. "Good. Maybe now people will choose peace because they understand the alternative." "Do you regret it?" Lissa asked. "Being known for violence?" Jake considered the question while watching the sun sink toward the horizon. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret every ship we lost, every person who died. But I don't regret protecting Earth. That's what the Reaper was always about. Not killing, but protecting. The galaxy just had to learn the difference." Lissa pulled out her tablet, showing him the title of her completed work. "The Paradox Warriors: How Humanity's Violent Past Became the Galaxy's Shield." "You got it right," Jake said, reading the title. "We're not warriors because we want to be. We're warriors because 10,000 years of history taught us how to be. But we're also more than that. We're the species that looked at our own capacity for destruction and chose to build something better." As Lissa left, she thought about the final truth she had discovered. The most dangerous warriors aren't those who love fighting. They're the ones who hate it, who understand its cost, but who will fight anyway when something precious needs protecting. The galaxy had learned to fear the Reaper, but more importantly, they had learned to trust humanity's judgment about when to unleash that power and when to keep it sheathed. Jake returned to his fence, to his simple life, carrying the weight of what he had done and what he was capable of doing. The Reaper was at rest, but never truly gone. Just waiting, watching, ready if ever needed again. Earth remained a symbol, not of violence, but of restraint. The planet that had reached the stars, while aiming weapons at itself, had chosen peace when it finally could. And the galaxy was grateful, because they finally understood what humans had always known. Peace is not the absence of capability for war, but the choice to not use it. The sun set over Montana, painting the sky in colors of fire. Jake finished his fence and went inside, leaving the Reaper outside in the gathering dark, where it belonged.